Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and this is the 4-position tier list for patch 7.37e. So let's get into the first hero, and this is Bounty Hunter. And this is pretty much the same hero that was good last patch in the 4-position, and it did get nerfed a little bit, but really not enough to actually make the hero significantly worse. And really, I didn't even do the support tier list last time because the patch came out in the middle of my support tier list, so you didn't actually get to see. But yeah, this hero was the best 4-position in the patch and was basically getting banned every single game in all pro games. It's very similar now. It's not as good, but it still is very, very good. And the main reason for that is the shuriken toss going through basically any hero or creep. It does extra damage. You can just spam this thing. It does infinity damage. And then obviously you're snowballing in the similar way that you always have been from track. It's just so good. The hero feels really annoying to deal with in lane, and throughout the entire game, it just does insane amounts of damage and also is very annoying with the vision and hunting people down in the jungle, which is also something that's very, very valuable these days because the jungle is so much bigger. Having that hero that can just hunt people down is great. Now, there are some awkward things about the hero, like it can feel in pubs like people aren't taking advantage of your track, of your fighting, of the gold you get, and of the spamming that you can do with your abilities, but that doesn't really matter because you can honestly just harass the enemy to the point where they have to group up. It feels very annoying to play against a bounty hunter and to farm jungle or side lanes against a bounty hunter, and so then you're kind of, even if your team is farming, just let them farm like every camp, every wave on the map, and then you just annoy and harass the enemy, and that's really the long and short of the hero. And then when you do fight, you get all these track kills, and it's just really, really good because of that. There's really not much else to say about that. It's mainly because the laning stage and the shuriken toss is so good that it is so much better than what it was before. Then we have Nyx, which is very similar. It's kind of like a bounty hunter, except with the bounty hunter, you get the vision, you get the track gold, you get to spam abilities. This is very similar in the sense that you're scouting people, you're very annoying, they have to kind of group up, they can't go alone on the map, but that's not because you're like just tracking people, giving vision and spamming abilities. It's more because you're like single target damage. So where bounty is kind of spread damage, this is the single target version of that where you just are invis on the map. If Nyx is missing, or you know that Nyx has ultimate up, you just have to be careful. As a support, you basically cannot show on the map. And even as a core, you better have a support behind you, or you better have some way, like a BKB or some kind of way to survive the Nyx combo, because he will just hit you out of invis, stun you, go for Dagon 5, and then just like mind flare you at the end, and you will die pretty much every single time. And he's also really good against Radiance heroes, which a lot of heroes are buying Radiance these days. Spike Carapace is great against that damage because you basically get that initial stun by pressing this even while you are Vendetta'd, and then you literally just blow them up with your combo again. And so that's why this hero is so good. Honestly, you can solo carry the game from the 4-position if you're able to get off to a good start, and if you can solo kill cores and stuff. And I've played games where the Nyx is on my team, or even I've played Nyx, or the Nyx is on the other team. It's so annoying to play against because it feels like you could be winning the game, but this hero can get the enemy back in the game because he just blows up one core in one fight and just turns the game. The other big thing to mention of why this hero is actually viable is because in the past, the laning stage was terrible, okay? What do you really do in the laning stage? You have decent regen, but you're just kind of like, you stun a guy and then you're melee, and like, this is basically the same thing that Lion does, except Lion stun is more reliable and Lion can hit people and mana drain, do all that. Well, Mind Flare actually one-shots creep waves, and you can one-shot big camps in the big camps, the big creeps in the big camps, just like Pudge does with the hook. And so now that you can do that, you can get reliable farm and levels on your hero without actually having to be super involved in the lane. Obviously, you want to lane, you want to pull, you want to block camp, you want to do all the things the 4-position does, contest runes, whatever. But now you can reliably get yourself farm and levels kind of independently of anything in the lane, which is really, really good. And then even after the laning stage, like, you can continue to scale up by just one-shotting those creeps in the jungle, and that's really, really good. And honestly, one of the biggest reasons why the hero is so good, because this combo thing has been around for a while, but now because of this, and because of the, going over terrain and all that kind of stuff, or mana burn against heroes like Medusa or whatever, that's really great. But it's because of the reliability in the early game that this hero is so good. And then lastly, for S tier, I personally wasn't expecting this hero to be the best hero in the patch in terms of supports, but if you look at Dota 2 Pro Tracker, it is getting picked a ton and its win rate is very good. And so I think for like a normal hero in the 4-position, this hero is great. It's pretty much the best normal support because Bounty and Nyx are very much like weird, not cheesy necessarily. They are good picks that you can pick in normal games, and it is like a pro Dota thing where they pick it. But it is kind of this weird one-off. Like, you don't have a super reliable stun. I mean, Nyx you kind of do, but it's more just like this weird invis kind of scouting pick-off hero. Lion is just your typical support, is more of what I'm trying to say. You're not going to go Fist of Death. That's like a weird core build. You're just going for this. And you're doing the normal things. You're stunning. You're doing all of that. You're mana draining the enemy, which is very annoying. You are mana draining your allies to give them more mana, which is great. And the biggest thing, too, is that this hero needs farm usually, or it's a lot better with farm, like a Blink especially. So that's why 4 position it is so good, because you do want to get some items on this hero. That's like the key. Like, you can play this hero as a 5. It is going to be on the 5 list, but it just, having items on the hero feels so much better. You're not probably going to go for Ags, maybe later in the game, maybe it's like a 4th item, but you definitely need a Blink. You definitely want a Shard. Sometimes you can get that for free, but if you don't, you definitely want to at least buy it, because, I mean, you want to get it as early as possible because it is so good. Having that BKB and the mana drain and all that kind of stuff for the multi-target. So that makes this hero a lot better with the Shard. And then in general, obviously with the Blink, you can initiate fights, you can counter-initiate fights, you can do some burst damage, all the same things Lion does. I just think right now, with the win rate and the pick rate, it's the best of the traditional supports. Then moving on to A tier, we have a ton of heroes in A tier, and that's because I think they're divided into like a few categories for the 4 position. First, I'll just mention these 4 guys basically, and kind of this 3rd guy here too, or girl here, Dark Willow. You basically have these traditional supports that are also sort of 5 positions that you play as a 4. I mean, Rubik not necessarily, and Dark Willow not necessarily, but they can kind of play either position, but they're just your traditional classic supports that you can play in the 4 position that are good right now. Shadow Shaman, you know, pretty good with the lifesteal on his Shackle, obviously good lockdown, decent push. The biggest thing that makes this hero super annoying, though, is that cluster cluck where you just split up and you survive so many times, like First Bloods at the runes, or just like if someone's diving tower. There's so many times that you survive on this hero, or the enemy survives, and it's very annoying. And you kind of don't think about the fact that this hero is you're gonna have to get another hit in on the hero after you actually kill him, which is super, super annoying. That extra survivability just does so much for the hero. There's so many times he survives. And then Lich, it's just a great hero right now, probably the best support overall, as a 5 especially, but because it's so good, it can be played as 4. It's just ridiculous. The shield is just OP. Like, you put a shield on somebody, on one of your cores, they like can't die. It's absurd how much damage that thing soaks. And then you can literally solo cores with your ultimate. The Shard is so good for that. Like, if you literally just put your Shard down, ult a core, and then just like fear them in, they'll probably die. Like, it's absurd. And then the Facet just adds that extra annoying part where the ult sticks on somebody, and then if they get back in range, it starts going again. That just makes it even more annoying, where it's not like, you know, okay, you cast an ult, it gets a few bounces, and then the guy, the one player, kind of leaves his team. Well, it's not just over. Like, they actually are kind of zoned from the fight now for a while, for however many more seconds, because they can't get back in range, because then the ult's just going to start again. That just adds that little bit of an extra problem to deal with the hero. And then Shadow Demon's great because of, it's kind of a weird hero. It doesn't get picked a lot in pubs. It's really good at high MMRs because of all, like, the save that it gives, which is great, because of the purge that it does on allies, because of the slow and the purge that it does on enemies these days, because of there's so many like buffs that enemies get that are like good buffs for themselves. And then eventually you can get a break, all that kind of stuff that you need on the hero, which is just, it just does a ton of damage. It has a good save. And the biggest thing it doesn't have is like a good reliable stun, but the save is offensive in nature, where you do get that setup for another stun. So that's, even though it's not super reliable in the sense that doesn't have like a lion stun or a shackle or something like that, it still is pretty good overall for a setup. And then especially against Radiance heroes, because so many heroes are buying Radiance these days, you're going to have probably a carrier, someone on the enemy team, like, you know, 50% of the time or more have a Radiance. Having that disruption to spawn Radiance illusions is always going to be good. Like, you can literally disrupt a hero that buys Radiance, and then you have these 2 extra Radiances going off in the fight. So like a hero like Alchemist or Spectre or something like that, it's almost like bad in a way to buy Radiance, because now you're giving a free Radiance to the enemy Shadow Demon. Then Rubik, I actually don't like this hero as much as a 5 position, same thing with Dark Willow, and actually I'm not a huge fan of the hero, but right now, if you know how to play Rubik, if you're a good Rubik player, it's a pretty good Rubik patch. Just in general, I think there's so many more spells these days that are good to be stolen, and the laning stage is decent, but it's not the best, and you do want items on the hero to be effective. Again, like I said, I'm not the biggest Rubik fan for most MMRs, but it just has a decent pick rate, decent win rate, so it is going to be up here on the A tier because it's like a decent Rubik patch because of all the big spells that are available to steal these days, because there's like Doom and Black Hole and Phoenix Egg, and there's just so many things that just turn fights that you can really be effective with on this hero right now. It's not like a lot of like passives and people just running people down with simple spells. There's a lot of big spells happening. Then Dark Willow. This hero is very annoying to deal with the Brambles. Like, it's basically just Brambles and the fact that you have this like pseudo save on yourself where people can't click you, and then eventually later on in the game you can get like significant damage. It's just, you're kind of like a discount Hoodwink in a way. You kind of are a carry from the 4 position, but you are a little bit more utility with all these annoying Brambles running around and the stun and everything like that. And then that's like your typical supports kind of going into your typical 4 positions here. And then we have another kind of carry from the 4 position tier right here, which is Zeus, Muerta, and Hoodwink. And these are all straightforward too. Like Zeus, you're just pumping out a ton of damage. You're getting your items from the 4 position because a lot of these like 4 positions are farming a ton now. So you don't rely, you don't provide a lot of utility. You don't reliably do any kind of stunning, just like mini stunning and TP cancels. But if you can have a good game, like if you already have a lot of frontline, this hero is perfect. Now, obviously, as a support, you're going to be picking first, but hopefully your team, if you do pick Zeus 4, they pick like a tanky frontline mid and a tanky frontline 3 position, something like that. Or maybe you have an alchemist or something on your team as a carry, so that's can frontline as well. So if you have a bunch of frontline on your team, Zeus is going to be a great addition to that. But if you're too squishy, if all your cores are squishy and backliners, it can feel a little bit griefy. But again, you're just pumping out a ton of damage. Same thing with Muerta. And same thing with Hoodwink. I almost feel like these heroes are very similar in the sense that they just go straight up carry items from the 4 position, and they sit in the back line, and they use their spells, and they delete heroes. And if you get to the point in the game where you have 3 like real carry items, and it's like 40 minutes or something, you probably are going to win the game because now you have 4 cores, and you're pumping out more damage a lot of times than the off lane, sometimes even the mid, depending on, the matchups and stuff like that. And that's really what these heroes do. And right now, they're getting picked a good bit. And I think Muerta and Hoodwink were like OP at certain points. They got nerfed a little bit, but I often thought, even though they were lower in picks and pick rate and win rate, I still felt like they were always pretty viable because they didn't get nerfed into oblivion, and you could still pick these and definitely win games from the 4 position. Then next we have your classic like melee 4 position tanky guys that initiate and frontline, stuff like that. We have Clockwork, very annoying with the cogs, with the facet that is like makes these cogs big and huge. You can like push people into tower and just push people all around. It's annoying. You can obviously initiate fights. You can get Orchid, which is crazy good on the hero. Tusk, another pretty good like frontlining hero that just saves also with the snowball and can kind of get out of control if he does get farm. Doesn't farm the best. Obviously, you can use shards and snowball to farm, but it's really a lot about like rotating on mid and saving allies when it does get later on to the game, because there's a lot of things these days like that are like one-shotting people, or even like a Doom where you're just going to save them for a little bit, or people get initiated on. It's just great for that. And you can also run down people in lane and just honestly dominate lanes in certain matchups. Then Earthshaker, very good as a 4 position, very good as a mid. Probably not as good as an off lane. It's more 4 position and mid. There's a lot of heroes that are kind of like that, either mid or 4 position. And that's because the lane is a little bit awkward on this hero. You might want to just like use your fissure to block the wave so that you get a better wave position. You might want to go rotate on mid. But as a 4 position, it can be a little bit awkward because sometimes you can feel like you're in limbo and not really have much to do. But if you can get out of the laning stage, if you can have a good laning stage, if you can just like annoy the support, contest the camps, pull a bunch, block the wave, do all this weird stuff with this hero, and you can get to a good blink timing by just kind of farming a wave there for the period between like 8, 10, and 15, 16 minutes, and then you can get a decent blink timing, the hero can kind of transition into more of a frontlining core and being really, really good as counter initiation and doing a ton of damage. And then Tiny, same thing it's been doing for a long time. You just go this the blink toss and the avalanche combo, tossing people into the tower, all that kind of annoying stuff. Again, similar to Earthshaker in the sense that early on, you really just have your toss, you really just have your avalanche, and when those things are on cooldown, you don't do much. You don't really harass with your right clicks very much. So it's about trying to find the best way, the most space to gain out of the hero, the most effectiveness in the early 5, 6, 7 minutes without griefing and just AFKing and just feeling like you're doing nothing. Sometimes that can be with these heroes just stacking the jungle, to be honest. If you don't have a lot of mana or your spells are on cooldown, that kind of thing. Then we have Pudge. Again, this is a specialty hero in some ways. People pick it all the time. But if you are good at Pudge, you can honestly own games. The damage on the hook now, as you like bring people back, is just ridiculous. If you get some good hooks off, hooking people under tower, just getting long range hooks on the enemy core, like, or even the support if they're out of position, like, it's absolutely absurd how much damage you will get, and you will just snowball into like a 4th core. But it is situational. You have to be good at the hero. You have to land your hooks. And then Phoenix, I would say this is also a specialist hero, but it's pretty good right now. It's just about getting reliable eggs off and also getting to that later portion in the game where you have some items and you have your levels. It's really mostly about levels, but having it as a 4 position, if you do get some items, you will absolutely own the game. And it's really about, kind of like these other carries from the 4 position. Do you get to that 30-40 minutes? Do you get your level 3 alt? Do you get 1 or 2 items? At that point, as long as you know what you're doing on the hero, you are going to own the game. Also, the laning stage is not that bad. It's more the mid game that feels a little bit awkward because you don't have a stun and your egg kind of sucks mid game. So that's the portion of the game that you need to survive, and you'll have a decent lane, and then late game you're a beast. Then B tier. This is kind of the last spot that I'm going to include some 5 positions that are decent, but they're not like the best. First, we have kind of Spirit Breaker. This is another tanky guy, but just kind of a worse version of these heroes right now. Magnus, another one that's like kind of a carry, kind of an initiation tanky guy who just like likes to just skewer people. That's really all you do. Or like you buy a blink and then you skewer people and you ult. You'd rather have one of these tankier guys that does something with their ultimate a little bit more because they're a little bit more reliable. And then using your 4 position Magnus to like empower people isn't always the best. Some games it's good, some games it's not. Bat Rider's decent right now. I don't see it in a lot of like pubs. I feel like this is more of a high MMR kind of support hero. It's just okay. It's not crazy. They just keep changing it, honestly, in all these weird little ways that it's hard to say if the hero is... Sometimes it feels like it's broken, and then they just immediately nerf it, and then it goes back down to being B or C tier. Then Skywrath. This is basically like a discount Zeus. You're just all in on the damage, but you'd rather have a Zeus, to be honest. It's okay. You can actually do pretty well if you get an early Rod of Atos. If you stomp the lane, then you can snowball the game and you can honestly be effective. But then some games you will feel like you just did nothing in the lane, your harass was garbage, and then you transition into doing nothing because you need at least some other stun to set up your ultimate. And that'll happen in a lot of games, but some games it won't, and it feels really bad at that time if you can't get your early items like Rod of Atos and other things like that. Then Winter Wyvern, kind of that 5 position that you can play as a 4 sometimes. It's decent, okay, not the best, just middle of the road, so that's why I'm including it in here. The heal with like the mana regen and the heal is decent. It can be very good in certain matchups against a lot of physical damage. The ultimate can also be really, really good in certain matchups. And then the harass in the lane can be decent as well. It's just kind of like middle of the road with everything. It doesn't do anything super special or unique. Then Pugna, more of like a healing support. More of a 5 position that does a lot of healing, and the typical things that Pugna does, being very annoying, saving people. Decrep is very annoying. The ward can be very annoying in certain matchups against like high mana cost heroes. It just is a little bit situational, and from the 4th position, again, these kinds of heroes, you're just playing 5, like even Snapfire, you're just kind of playing 5, but from the 4. There's really no differentiation. That's why they're B tier. They're probably going to be a little bit higher, or maybe even Snapfire is just going to be the same. I think these heroes, even Winter Wyvern, aren't the worst at 4, but they're not the best at 5. So it's just kind of middle of the road heroes, but they're not like absolutely awful in one way or another. You can pick them either way. They do decent with items, but they're not like the best. And that's like Snapfire too. Like you can farm pretty well with your spells, so you can get items, which is good. And you also have that like long range, Q that you can use to like really harass people in lane if you want to pick that one. But otherwise, it's like, do you really you don't really transition to a right click as easily as these guys do. Your spells can be pretty effective early game, but then fall off pretty quick with the ultimate. So it just feels a little bit awkward, but it definitely is still viable, and you can get farm and your items pretty quickly. Then Ringmaster's like this weird hero that they introduced, and people don't really play him very much. He's just kind of like whatever. Like you have a good save, you have decent harass. Your stun isn't super reliable, but if you can get the fear off and the stun, it's like fine. Your ultimate is a little bit awkward. It feels like sometimes you can get great ultimates where people are staring at it and then they just like all get stunned. But then sometimes it feels like you cast an ultimate out and everyone knows it's coming and it doesn't do anything. Like it's very weird and awkward. That's why it's middle of the road. That's why people aren't really picking it too much. It just has a weird position like in the meta, or as its kit is just awkward. That's the big problem with it. Because it does some good things, but it does every little thing that it does. It does a lot of things, and it does them well, but it doesn't do anything like spectacular. It's not like, oh, this is the definition of the hero. This is what defines the hero. It's like, it's just middling, a little bit of everything. And then Tinker is kind of more of a cheese specialist hero. It's awkward. It can be good. You can do a lot of damage. You can save allies. You can heal a lot in team fights, and it was probably better before. I think it got nerfed a little bit after it was kind of being spammed a bunch. And now it's just okay. I've seen it in some games do decent, but in some games it feels like I have a 4-position tanker and this hero just doesn't do anything. And that's kind of the problem, is it's like, do you know what you're doing on the hero? Can you position it right? Can you use your spells right and transition into a core? Or are you just like laying down March and thinking you're good, but you're actually terrible and you just have no impact at all? That's kind of the difference with the hero. Then we have C tier. Marcy, you're just playing carry from the 4-position kind of. I mean, you can be very aggressive in lane, but you really just go like BKB and just punch people, but you'd almost rather have one of these heroes or like, you know, one of these heroes. That's kind of just the long and short of it. Earth Spirit, more of a mid these days just with how the kit works, but you can play it as a 4. It's just you'd probably rather have one of these tanky guys. Dawnbreaker's so good right now, I think you can still play this hero as a 4-position support because you can get items. And in the past, it has been played as pretty much every single position. I think right now it's just overwhelmingly the best off lane, so you don't really pick it in other positions, but if you want to pick it as a 4, it definitely is a hero that people are picking sparingly, and it has a decent win rate because of that. It's just not the best. Then Gyro, surprisingly, actually is an okay 4. The ultimate does a significant amount of damage. The shard is very good. At just certain matchups, it feels like it's useless. It's obviously going straight for the magic damage build. That's pretty much all you do with the hero in this position. I was probably going to put it D tier, but then I looked, and the win rate and the pick rate isn't that bad. It's not like D tier worthy. It's actually okay, which is a little bit surprising. Probably because it's not getting picked much as a support. It's more getting picked as a carry these days. But I think the support is more viable, and I honestly expect this hero to become like a legitimate support at some time if they do. Like if they decide, okay, we're going to nerf the carry version again, but we're going to buff the support magic damage version again, like in the next patch, this hero could end up being like B or A tier. Then Doom is kind of in the same league as like Dawnbreaker, where it's like the hero, or even like Earth Spirit, maybe not really Marcy, more like Dawnbreaker and maybe Earth Spirit, where it's better as like a 3, better as, you know, Earth Spirit's better as a mid, better in another position, but it's good enough with like one single spell, like Dawnbreaker with the save and stuff, and Doom with the ultimate, that you can get away with picking it 4. It just is a little bit awkward, and you're kind of useless for the most part until you get like Blink, and you'd almost rather have one of these guys that has at least some impact early on, and Doom is the only spell. Then Enchantress, you're playing right clicker from the 4 position for the most part, which is viable. I mean, it has heals and other things like that, but it's a little bit awkward. Also a specialist hero. Weaver, another one you're kind of playing for right clicking, but again, these heroes just do more for doing that, like going damage carry from the 4 position. Same thing with Clinks. You can totally do it. It's an invis hero, and it is annoying like these guys, but these guys offer more. Like there's no stun, there's no track. Like you're pretty much just running around, just one-shotting, like killing people, but you need items to do that, where this hero, like, it does need items, but it can do that kind of just from like once it gets 6. This hero doesn't really do that. You need something. You need like Orchid or Deso or some kind of item that actually does something to help your team out. And that's why it'd probably just be better to pick one of these guys or even pick another kind of carry from the 4 position. Then lastly, for viable heroes, you have Monkey King, another one of those that's like Dawnbreaker or Doom, where it's good in other positions. It's good more like a mid, maybe even a carry, but you can pick it as a 4 because it is able to like spring around on the trees pretty well. You're just going to be buying carry items. So again, probably better to pick another one of these heroes. Techies is the magic damage hero, so Sky and Zeus are just better versions of the magic damage hero. Even Lich is a better version of the magic damage hero, and Lich offers more defensively and all that kind of stuff in the lane and everything. So if you're a good Techies player, you can definitely pick it, but it's just going all in on that burst, and sometimes it can be grief. Mirana's not great right now. This hero feels like it's either like really overwhelmingly good because it like transitions into a core, great, but there's just so many heroes now that transition into cores better than this hero and have more reliable spells than the arrow and stuff like that. So that's pretty much why this hero is not very good. And I didn't really include it in any of the core lists because it is, people are like, have been experimenting with it as a core, but I just don't think it's very viable. Keeper of the Light is like, I guess if you have a Medusa or something, you could pick it, but again, it feels awkward. Another magic damage hero that's not great. You'd rather have one of these guys. Invoker's a decent hero right now from the mid lane, and you can potentially pick it as a 4. It's a little bit of a grief, but it's like kind of whatever. Same thing with Lena, like because it's decent as a core, you could potentially pick it, but again, a little bit of a grief because of that, because you kind of need items on these heroes to actually be effective. And that's sort of similar with Nature's Prophet. Nature's Prophet at least offers a little bit more in terms of like teleporting around the map and stuff like that. You can go for Ags and other things that make you really annoying. and like split pushing things and transition into another core, but that comes at a great cost a lot of times where you are griefing the game a little bit. So that's why, you know, you'd rather pick another one of these carry heroes that feels like you're not going to get reported and you're not really griefing the game. And then F tier, these are all heroes that just are not viable right now as 4 positions and really supports in general. Wind Ranger, not good, hasn't been a support for a bit now. Ricky, just, why would you pick, like, it's just bad. Like, pick one of these other heroes. If you want to do what Ricky does, pick even Clinks or one of these heroes, obviously. Dazzle just feels really bad as a 4 position. You're trying to take advantage of your Q in the lane, and that just doesn't happen. And then Axe is a good hero against this hero later, and like it's just probably the worst of the healing supports. And it's better to just pick it as a 5 if you're going to pick it. Queen of Pain, kind of like one of these heroes, but just even worse. Like, you know, I'd rather have, at least this guy has a stun. Like, picking this as a 4 is kind of grief. Same thing with Sniper. Like, don't do this, man. Like, I know you're going to go for the freaking Ags and the Conda or whatever. Just stop. Just don't do it. It's not good. And then Enigma is just really more of a core because of the way it functions now. It's not really as good of a support because you're not denying the enemy your ally creeps. You're not denying the range creep or anything like that. So it's just not as good. It's really almost like griefing, to be honest, because you're just, what are you going to be doing? Farming and stuff. It's just weird. I mean, maybe you're trying to jungle Enigma. I don't know. I don't think that's really viable. I think maybe Veno's the only one that can really jungle, which I didn't include on this list, but yeah. I mean, maybe you could put Veno in its own category here, like Jungle Veno, because people have been experimenting with that. I was going to talk about it maybe even in the 5 position list, but don't do that. Don't do that with Enigma either. It's kind of grief. And then lastly, this little hero that was hiding up in the corner, again, Slark. I know you're like, guys, stop it. What is going on? But I'm being serious, or I don't know, maybe I'm not being serious. I'm just putting out the Slark propaganda so that people don't get reported when they pick this, because this is a viable support. Stop saying I'm wrong. You can comment in the comments whether you think I'm wrong, but this hero is actually a support. And actually, I think it's a better support than it is in offlane. I'm not even kidding you. I've been watching some like higher level players like win a lot with this hero on support, like have like an 80% win rate and like actually stomp the game. So I'm going to explain it and why I think it's actually better than the offlane version. Because I think offlane, you're kind of relying on doing some of the similar stuff. You don't have to do any of that with this hero as a support. So you're doing the same thing if you watch the offlane tier list, and I mentioned a little bit. You're picking this one, this Dark Reef Renegade, and then because of the passive, level 0, basically minute 0, level 1, you automatically know where all the wards are. So you can secure the mid ward for the mid lane and deward it for the mid lane. You can secure every high ground that you know for sure if there is a ward there. And then you also have this insane regen where you can just buy like 6 tangos, and then especially if you're up against a melee support, but even some other range supports where you can like walk up to them if they're trying to deward the camps and stuff, you will out harass them every time because you just hide in the trees a little bit. You get insane regen, especially with a tango, and people just underestimate it. They don't realize what's going on. And because your main job is to like ward and deward as a support, especially early on, this is so effective, and the regen gives you such a good laning stage, and really your main job as a support then as a Slark is to just harass the support and annoy the support. Just like be super annoying, go at the camps, ward and deward, hit them a bunch. Just let your offlane, your core, have a good game and just 1v1 the carry, because for the most part your offlane is probably going to be stronger than the carry, and if you just give them free farm and a free lane, it's going to be great. You can go for Pounce level 1 to secure a kill, you can go for Essence Shift level 1 to like harass the enemy. You're going to be maxing out Pounce early, and you have this like pseudo stun that's a leash that can isolate heroes. You also have a great way then later on, after securing your laning stage, which is actually decent, to just deward the entire map. And that's kind of your main thing that you're doing, is you're dewarding the entire map. The enemy is not allowed to have a single ward at all, period. And that just is super frustrating and suffocating for the enemy to deal with. Like, in every single game, just having 0 wards, it's absurd, honestly. And that's what this hero does, and I think it's just so OP that that's what makes the hero so good. But then the fact that you have this good escape, the TP cancel, a way to isolate heroes, you can kind of frontline for your heroes as well, because you have a save for yourself, a good way of getting out if you're dewarding, or saving yourself if they try to go on you when you're dewarding. And then that extra thing, which also makes this a viable support, is the save. Against Axe, against Legion, against Beastmaster, against any of these heroes that like to isolate heroes on your team and like, call them or duel them or whatever, you literally put this down, they're saved instantly. Boom, easy. And the fact that you have all these combinations where they have 0 vision, you're controlling the whole map, and you have a save, and you have this lockdown that's a TP cancel, it just has every little thing that a support wants. It's honestly good. Like, don't get me wrong, it is kind of weird, but it is good. Like, I'm telling you, it's good. If we're saying some of these other heroes like are viable, and some of these are trash. Like this hero is probably at least D tier, maybe C tier. So that's when I say it's good, I'm not saying it's A. Like, maybe it is, I don't know, but it's at least like pickable. You can do it. Now, and I'm just putting out the PSA out there. I'm trying to get the propaganda out there so that people don't get reported, because I literally want to spam this hero as a support because it's actually good. Like, I'm not kidding. So anyway, that's my Slark rant. And you can transition, especially as a 4 position, you can transition into core later. Like you can buy, I think usually people are buying Yules first, because that's really good for like isolating heroes, saving yourself, that kind of thing. But then you can even later, you can go into Ags, maybe Lincolns, you can get a Diffusal if you want, like that kind of stuff. And you can farm waves with your Q still. Like it's still decent in that way. So anyway, that's my Slark rant for the support. I think it's actually good. Maybe try it in games. You'll probably still get reported because like not everyone's going to see this video. So anyway, that's my rant. I know it took like 4 or 5 minutes to do that, but whatever. Slark support is real, guys. Trust me. So anyway, that's my 4 position tier list for patch 7.37E. As always, guys, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.